Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into one of the absolute wildest, most fascinating stories in modern business history. I want you to cast your mind back to 2014 for a second. At the dead center of the tech universe was this 30-year-old woman. She wore a black turtleneck, famously seemed like she never blinked, and deliberately lowered her voice to give off these intense Steve Jobs vibes. She had this absolutely magnetic persona. And using it, she convinced some of the smartest people in America that she was going to completely revolutionize human health and essentially cure the fear of needles forever. But there was just one colossal problem hiding behind that carefully crafted image. Her revolutionary machine never actually worked. $4.5 billion. Let that staggering number sink in for a second. That was Elizabeth Holmes's personal net worth, on paper at least, at the peak of her company's success. Just to put that into perspective for you, that made her worth more than Oprah Winfrey. And this immense, world-class wealth was entirely built on a medical device that was fundamentally broken. So how on earth does something like this even happen? Well, it all starts with a simple, incredibly compelling question. What if a single drop of blood, taken from a tiny, almost painless finger prick, could reliably run hundreds of medical tests? I mean, think about it. No more giant needles, no more drawing vial after vial of blood, no more waiting days for stressful lab results. This was the captivating dream that hooked early investors right from the start. It's a vision that everyone, from everyday patients to top doctors, desperately wanted to be true. Part 1, the billion-dollar promise. Okay. Let's dive into this. This grand vision was actually born back in 2003 when a 19-year-old Stanford dropout set out to create real-time cures simply because she had a massive fear of needles. She quickly rebranded the company to a name that would become infamous: Theranos. It's this clever little mashup of two powerful words in medicine: therapy and diagnosis. And honestly, this was brilliant branding. It communicated exactly what the company wanted to be, the ultimate one-stop solution for healthcare. That story was so potent that in its very first year, Theranos managed to rake in over $6 million. You see, investors weren't just buying into a prototype. They were buying into an irresistible narrative and a founder who meticulously packaged herself as the next Silicon Valley visionary. Part 2, selling a perfect story through power and perception. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is who they actually put in charge. By 2010, the company hit a $1 billion valuation, and Holmes had secretly partnered with Sunny Balwani to completely control operations. But to build their fortress of credibility, Theranos brought in heavyweights. We're talking former U.S. Secretaries of State Henry Kissinger and George Shultz, right alongside retired military generals. But look at their medical backgrounds. None. None. Instead of recruiting actual laboratory scientists or health experts to check the math on their complex tech, they hoarded raw political power. It gave them instant, unquestionable credibility in the eyes of the public. And you know what? That strategy of using power to project confidence worked beautifully. Boom. First came a massive 2013 partnership with Walgreens to put testing centers inside American pharmacies. Then came the mainstream media validation in 2014, with Holmes landing on the cover of Fortune and Forbes literally naming her the youngest self-made female billionaire in the world. This absolute tidal wave of mainstream hype fueled an unbelievable $9 billion valuation. The illusion was fully forged. Part 3, the faulty machine. Let's take a look inside the Edison. And this brilliantly illustrates the deception. Because while the world was popping champagne over this medical miracle, the core technology inside the company was utterly failing. Holmes promised that the Edison, their proprietary magic box, could reliably run over 200 tests from that tiny prick of blood. In reality, employees knew it was a disaster. It was error-prone, inconsistent, and could barely handle a fraction of those tests. The dream just did not match the actual physics and biology. So what did they do to keep up the facade? They secretly bought traditional lab equipment, the exact machines they claimed to be making obsolete, modified them, and hid them in the back to run the real patient samples. It was a complete bait and switch. Now, to protect a secret this massive, the company enforced a notoriously toxic corporate culture. Employees who raised concerns or pointed out the failing data, they were aggressively pushed out or silenced. And the human cost of maintaining this lie was very, very real. It culminated tragically in 2013 with Ian Gibbons. He was a highly respected scientist at the company who harbored deep doubts about the tech. Under immense pressure, he died by suicide on the exact day he was scheduled to give testimony in a lawsuit involving Theranos. It really shows the devastating lengths the company went to just to bury the truth. Part 4, The House of Cards, Shattering the Illusion. You know, you can only bend reality for so long, especially when you're dealing with actual human biology and patient health. Eventually, the reality distortion fields had to shatter. And this was the exact moment everything changed. In October 2015, Wall Street Journal reporter John Carrieru published a massive bombshell investigation. Built entirely on the courage of incredibly brave former employees who decided to speak out, his reporting exposed the multi-billion-dollar lie to the whole world. He revealed that the Edison machine was a total mirage, and patients were getting results from the very commercial machines Theranos mocked. This wasn't just a product delay, guys. This was the exposure of a foundational lie. Let's move to this and see how the fallout builds, because it was swift and it was catastrophic. Federal regulators swooped in and found massive safety violations in their labs. Walgreens instantly pulled the plug on their partnership. But the absolute worst part? Theranos was forced to void or correct tens of thousands of real blood test results. We're talking about real patients who had been making real, potentially life-altering medical decisions based on totally fabricated data. By 2016, the SEC had officially opened a fraud investigation. And the financial destruction? Absolute. From a towering $9 billion valuation in 2014, straight down to zero in 2018. The company literally wiped out billions in wealth in a matter of months, ultimately leading to its formal dissolution in September of 2018. The startup darling was officially dead. So the long legal collapse began with that 2015 expose and led to the company dissolving in 2018. But the justice system takes time, right? It wasn't until 2021 and 2022 that Holmes and Balwani actually stood trial for fraud in separate cases. And the story is still incredibly relevant right now because it was just in 2025 that a federal appeals court officially upheld both of their sentences, cementing the final chapter of this whole legal saga. And what were the final penalties when the dust settled? Elizabeth Holmes was convicted on 4 counts of fraud and sentenced to over 11 years in federal prison. Sunny Balwani was convicted on 12 counts and received a sentence of nearly 13 years. Furthermore, the courts ordered a staggering combined $452 million in restitution to the victims of their fraud. Both of them are currently serving those sentences today. So, the crucial point is, Part 5, the final lesson. Some meaningful takeaways here. $700 million. That is the amount of cold, hard cash Theranos raised from supposedly sophisticated investors. And they raised all of it from people who simply never demanded independent, peer-reviewed proof that the underlying science actually worked. They just let a founder's confidence stand in for the company's competence, and they let a board of powerful politicians blind them to the total lack of scientific rigor. Which brings us right to this powerful quote from our source material. The lesson of Theranos is about what happens when fake it till you make it meets human health. Look, in software, shipping a buggy app and fixing it later with an update, that's a standard business strategy. But applying that same Silicon Valley startup culture to medical devices crosses a terrifying line. A buggy app crashes your phone, but a buggy blood test, that can literally cost someone their life. So what does this all mean? Well, I want to leave you with this final thought to ponder as we wrap up this explainer. In the incredibly fast-paced world of business and innovation, when exactly does a captivating story stop being an aspirational pitch and start becoming a dangerous lie? It is such a fine line between selling a bold vision of the future and committing outright fraud. The story of Theranos is a stark, unforgettable reminder that a great narrative is incredibly powerful, but it is never, ever a substitute for real proof. Thanks so much for joining me to explore this case today and keep asking the tough questions.